Okay, so let's go.
Okay. So morning, everyone. I was asked to do this. I did a talk about a year ago, and at that time there was a lot going on in the tech sphere, particularly in the app space, with Google and Apple really wanting to take control of their own environments, so that they could maximize the revenues that they got really from each other. Google being a major, obviously, advertising funded business, and Apple being a technology hardware business that has services around it. And since then, there's been a total transformation of the entire tech space, particularly in the app space, with a lot of businesses losing the old toolkit that they could use in terms of trying to find customers based on like-for-like behaviors with other customers, because people have stopped sharing their data. And in that year, you've seen a total transformation of probably 70 to 80% of the people that know about being able to stop their cookies being shared with other apps, stopping them. And so that has meant that you, as an app user and as app owner, you've really had control, and it's meant that it's been much more difficult to find new customers. And so what this has done is really transform the world of loyalty and what that means. And there are a lot of players in the space that focus on loyalty programs. And what I've been doing is talking to businesses and working with a few businesses very early stage in really getting to improve their attitude towards loyalty and retaining customers. So what I put together to get today is kind of like a toolkit and a top view of how I go about that with a client, and hopefully this has some value for you. So sorry, I just got to. Okay, so as you can appreciate at the moment, there's a huge amount of uncertainty in the market, and I think regardless of how you're working and who you're working with, we've got economic challenges, much more price sensitivity, tighter consumer pockets, and credit issues for both suppliers and buyers, with people defaulting already, and we haven't really hit a big crisis point yet. But everyone's very aware of who they're dealing with and what's their credit rating, so that they're ensured that things are delivered and paid for. When we're talking about the future, whether you're an owner or an investor, everyone's really looking for growth, and that growth has tended to be, and then certainly in my conversations, I don't know whether you found the same, it still is about how many new customers have you got, how is your business growing, what are you extracting from them in terms of revenue per month, revenue per year, depending on how big you are as a business. But my frustration when I'm brought into companies, particularly on a change management basis, to really help them stabilize their revenues, is that you find that the setup of the organization is totally focused on finding new customers. So you have a sales team, you've got a marketing function, they're out chasing new business, and that's great. But what you find is that when you challenge these businesses on what are you doing to keep your customers, and more importantly, who are your best customers, you see blank faces many, many times. And what I've been trying to do over the last year is to really get businesses on an early stage growth curve to understand that investing in their loyalty attitude is going to see rewards much later on, and will stop them making the mistakes of other businesses where they end up seeing huge amounts of their customers leaving every year. So this is the typical flow chart, as you were, of any business from the start, where you're raising awareness. Hey, I'm starting up a business. Would you be interested in that? Great. Well, let's start working. Then you acquire the customer, and then you start working with the customer. And then you get to this middle point, which is, okay, so shall I focus on retaining that customer, or do I need more customers? And what you end up finding is that businesses flow back to the left of the curve again, and then start that cycle. And once they start bringing in a marketing function, marketing teams, regardless of what stage they're in, get high on the oxygen of spending money and winning new customers. And so that they claim, you know, I've got 20 new customers this week, or I've got 100 new customers today, depending on the size of the business. And that then flows through to more ad spend, more marketing, which makes their job bigger, which means they can hire more people. And so their job becomes more important within the organization. And that's all great. It works really well for the marketing function. And as long as the equation of money in to money out works, then that's a great model. But what you find is that you're missing on the right-hand side all the opportunities of what's happening when those customers start repeating business, whether that be voluntary or need. So in the terms when you look at utility businesses, the churn rate is very low. As we know, once you join a bank, the chances of you moving to another bank, once you join a mobile network, particularly here in Portugal, the challenge of moving to another supplier is so great that you just think, I can't be bothered, so I'll just stay. And so you see almost the pain of moving being really beneficial to these players. And so they don't really care about growing the business, upselling, cross-selling, and organically growing, because ultimately you have to stay with them. But for new businesses and new markets, you see this flow from left to right, but the majority stay pretty much at the red zone, and then don't do a really bad job of getting to the green zone. People say, so what does that mean? So what is a good retention? You know, how do I know whether I'm doing a good job? And these stats from this month from one of the major tech platforms that helps with recurring revenue in the US, but is a global business. These are the stats that come in. So these are the monthly churn, average monthly churn by sector. And you can see with SaaS, it's lower, but that tends to be B2B as well as B2C. So you get a lot of higher retention in some of those platforms. Whereas if you get something like education, that could be a course. And so the chances are that people buy a course and then they leave. Box of the month are things like, you know, presents, flowers, whatever, giving you a gift. People sign up for something and then they never use it again. And then so you see the churn. And people would say, well, okay, 4.7%, that's pretty good if I'm keeping 95% of my customers. But the reality is that if you lose 4.7% of your customers every month, by the time you get to the end of the year, you've lost about 47% of the customers that you started with. So you really have to have an acquisition model to really keep that going. So when you look at it from these averages, you can see why the majority of leading businesses in this sector, particularly when they're in the big numbers, are having to spend so much money on focusing on acquisition and growing the pie, because they're losing people on the back end all the time. So people like Netflix, for example, on media entertainment, will be losing about 5% every month. And so their interest is growing the Netflix universe and growing all around the world, because as they start losing in the US, they can always say they're growing internationally. The good news is if you stick around, you tend to churn less. And so this is shown through the stats where companies are shared, and you can get to a point like when you're 10 years beyond that you have a very low churn, but these numbers do get influenced by those utility businesses that tend to have very little turnover. But as a new business, you can see it's a huge amount. So there are 3 business types, and apologize if I'm preaching to people who know all about this, but you have the B2B SaaS businesses. These tend to be really only operate at scale simply because of the investment required to get them to a point of equity within the choice available for customers. And these tend to be contract periods. And so, it's very investment heavy on both sides to integrate, and then therefore there's a lot of investment. And when you do a retention model on SaaS, it tends to be looked at from a perspective of the number of people retained during a period, divided by the number of people, the number of customers at the beginning of the period. So if you have less, then you're doing a really bad job. If you have more than you had at the beginning of the period, then you show the percentage growth essentially. When you've got a B2C one-off business like an Airbnb or eBay, for example, when they're actually buying individual units, then you look at the behavior and you look at active users divided by the number of registered users who bought one or more things. And then you do that and look at it from a period to period basis, so you can see how actively active your users are. And where the majority of my work focuses is in this lower level, the B2C free to use with ads, who want to think about improving their revenue because they're either working on a freemium basis, trial basis, and they're nervous on where to go next. How do they package their services to get to a point where they can have a stable recurring revenue baseline? And obviously at the beginning of any business, it's really all about getting people using the platform and using it on a regular basis, using a service. So what I've done is I've broken this down into 5 steps in terms of how you transform a business. And this is really from a learning curve that I've taken over my career, and how I can bring it to light for lots of different types of businesses. But the headlines really are that loyalty is a mindset. It's not a loyalty program. There are lots of really great businesses offering off-the-shelf loyalty program solutions now that you don't really have to spend or resource up internally to make it work. They will help you do that. And if any of you need any advice on that, then I can help you. But where I'm positioning myself within the loyalty space is to really look outside slightly from loyalty programs and look at the overall attitude and culture within a business to see how focused they really are within the business to loyalty. And you'll see why I'm getting to that point in a minute. On the brief for this talk, I think I mentioned that, is loyalty about subscription? Is it about membership? So we'll go into that in a little bit. But subscription ultimately means a price package. And in that price package, there will be a term, how long the package is going to last for, and then the benefits involved in each of those packages. But in reality, subscriptions mean price packages. And this kind of works, and a lot of business think that subscriptions are, the answer to their recurring revenue issues. But what I've found is that what's consistent is that if marketing and the founder, marketing and the CEO decide to go down this road, but the rest of the business doesn't really understand what's going on and doesn't deliver on the loyalty promise, then things will fall apart. So loyalty is all about, for me, making sure that all the teams within a business understand what loyalty is, why they're doing it, and what's going to be the benefit for everybody at the end of it by working this different way. And the overriding almost like no fail test is ensuring over delivery and customer expectation across every single aspect of you, your product, your team, and the delivery of the product, and even the post delivery of the product. As I alluded to earlier, there's a lot of investment when it comes to acquiring a customer, and there's a lot of investment internally in terms of growing teams that do that for the company. And it's really exciting when you're seeing, on a dashboard in a startup, new people joining, new people subscribing, new people using the service. It's amazing. It's really, it energizes the team. But you have to keep those clients. It's unsustainable to keep on spending money acquiring clients, acquiring business if you're in a B2B scenario, and then losing them because you don't deliver on some of the other areas. And that's really about investing in understanding a client better. So when you have churn, and churn is inevitable, every business is going to have churn. You either make a decision, you either chase what you've lost, replace it, you chase the actual customers that you lost, try and convince them to come back, lower your prices, change the team representing that account, for example, or you look at where your real revenue is coming from, where your true loyal clients are, what their behaviors are, and really understand why they keep on coming back. So a lot of the work I do is in this area. Who are the clients? Why are they there? Where are they? So it's you really need to get into the granular detail, which in smaller businesses can be literally a phone list, and in bigger businesses it's all going to be about looking at the data, and that can be anything from a 3 to 6 month project. Where I came to all this from, and hopefully this gives you a real life analogy for you to get your head around, which I've been able to use in startups and beyond, is if you look at Ticketmaster as a business where I was, where I led the EMEA team for 7 years. It's really about understanding who the client is, and what Ticketmaster did very early on as email and technology started to open up the opportunity for us to understand customers better, was to really dig down deep into making sure that every time we communicated with a customer, that we got to understand a little bit more about them. And one of the challenges of Ticketmaster, and still is, to be honest, is that we didn't really know whether the customer was the person going to the event that we were selling. And so we had really muddy data. We would say, oh, Mrs. Brown is going to Coldplay, for example, but Mrs. Brown might have been buying the Coldplay ticket for her son or her husband and not going at all. And so making an assumption that the customer was the person that was going to the show was false. So what we started doing was really looking at the behavior of the repeat customer and seeing whether there are any assumptions that we can make, so that we could start bucketing them into segments and different profiles. And the way to do this is to manage what we call first-party data. So this was not bought from anyone else. This is all the data that we created through email, through transaction, through website behavior, through app behavior, bringing all that together to really understand the customer and what they were looking for, which meant that we could then start engaging them more, because you need to get to a point like Ticketmaster where, say, 87-80% of the emails that you send are opened and read. And that only comes from learning. But when you get to that point, you know that you have very little rub between you and the customer that you're talking to. And you have happy customers in terms of you're giving them information before anyone else, for example. You're rewarding them, you're getting them engaged, you're rewarding them, encouraging them to review the shows they went to. providing opportunities to buy VIP tickets, etc. And so that funnel, what we call a funnel of communication between an initial conversation, i.e. someone coming to the site saying, I want to buy something, to say 2-3 years later where they bought 4 tickets, you can start making assumptions about who they are and serving them more accurate communication, which, you know, is what everyone wants to do. What I did when I left corporate and set up on my own was really focus on Agile in the way that Agile works within businesses. I don't know how many of you are aware. Is everyone aware of the Agile approach? No. Okay. So the Agile approach is a fantastic way of working, and it really works for teams who are wanting to improve a product or wanting to build a product, but know that they need to launch and grow and develop that product with it not being the perfect product in vision, if that makes sense. So you're thinking about constantly iterating and improving. And to do that, you have to do really 4 key things, and they're the center of the Agile process. One is to shift your thinking from what are the outputs? What am I doing today? I am coming in, this is what I'm up to no. What are we trying to achieve? What are the outcomes here? And outcomes over outputs is the central foundation of Agile. It questions everything that everyone does within the organization, and it requires decentralized decision-making. And decision-making, particularly at a startup, is very often led from the front by a founder, a passionate founder who has an idea, has a vision. But the successful founders bring in teams of people that know more than they do about their individual sphere of excellence. And then they're allowed to work together to find the right decision for smaller goals. And why we call it Agile is that we break down a huge task into smaller tasks, and we target through what we call the sprint process, a model of work which then says, if I'm going to launch something in 6 months, what does week 1 and 2 look like? What do I want to achieve by the end of week 2? And you set yourself goals, no more than 3, usually no more than 3, sometimes 4 objectives. And these objectives can be different for individual teams, or ideally in a bigger organization, you have teams that involve all the different representations of the different teams. So they work together on a project. But at the beginning of an organization, it's really about that common communication and having decentralized decisions, ensuring that they deliver on these objectives. Then where this is also highly relevant is a focus on the customer. Everything has to be about looking at what the customer would want. And for that, and in this area, this is all about research and all about talking to future customers, potential customers, current customers, past customers, depending on the life cycle of your company. But this is absolutely vital to the growth and change of future development, because your customers are your product user. The founder invariably becomes less of a product user, and their time is spent doing other things, raising investment, blah, blah, blah. So customer focus is the future pipeline of your business. It ensures funding, it ensures investment, it ensures other users using it. If you've got a platform that requires, a busyness of activity from other people, whether it be a social network or whatever. So it's all about focusing on making sure that the customers are getting what they want. And once you've got all that information, responding to change, following a plan. And that plan fundamentally with Agile changes. It changes every month based on what you've been doing, how successful you were at achieving the first 2 weeks goal, whether things have been in what we call put into backlog. are they there because they shouldn't have been there in the first place? Was it too easy to do that objective task to deliver on the objective, or was it too easy and so we can add more? So it's really about responding to change throughout a plan. And what I've done is create a new set of tools based on people thinking about agile loyalty, but really using the framework of agile marketing to be specific to thinking about loyalty. And this will involve, process management, looking at how you're onboarding clients, how you're bringing them in, how quickly you respond to people when they're interested in coming to work for you, coming to, or there could be work with you, but basically working together or buying stuff from you. How robust are you and the team to change? That's kind of like stress test really, that's done through questionnaires, etc. Validated learning. So validated learning is making sure that you once you've done something, even if it's a failure, you then check why it failed, so that you then can take that information and learn from it, and then make sure that either that's documented so that it's not done again, or that you can really take that success and repeat in somewhere else. So it's rather than, oh, that happened, so let's pass that by. The framework is to learn from everything, failure and success, and make sure that the organization is guided by those results. Sounds boring, but it's really, really vital. Great customer experience is vital to loyalty, and I'll go on to that in a second, and how people can make that happen. Structure is fundamental for any organization, particularly in early growth, and not making mistakes of bending to people's whims in terms of like seniority, wanting to have hierarchy, if that doesn't necessarily work, and particularly building silos within teams, hiding information, not sharing, and this fear of failure, which when that happens tends to then create these structural blocks, and things start to break down in terms of information sharing and learning sharing. And alignment is once you've got all those in place, alignment is about making sure that all these adhere to the outcomes and the objectives of the organization. So it sounds like it's quite structured, and it is, but this tends to work on a daily basis. You work with your team 15 minutes. Agile tends to work on no more than 20-minute meetings if possible. And in 15 minutes every day, each team will meet, go through what happened yesterday and how well they are on track to delivering their objectives. And within loyalty, this would involve someone from the marketing team, someone from client service, customer service, probably someone from the tech team, just to make sure that there aren't any barriers there. And then potentially one of the senior management team, if there was one, founder can come in once a week. But it's really to make sure that every day you're learning from what happened yesterday. And practice every day is a brilliant way of working. And so at the end of the day, you end up with outcome results. And the things to manage and measure would tend to be things like, what are your values, the vision and mission? And those will be invariably set by the founder to begin with, set you. And then you've got to make sure that mission, those values, that vision and mission are aligned with the team that you have. It's shared, everyone understands it, but then it's tested and challenged. Because a value, a vision and a mission might sound great on paper, but if you find that your loyal customers actually are looking for something totally different, then you have to make a decision. Do you actually not want those customers that are coming back on a regular basis because they actually quite like your candles, for example, that they really like your glass packaging, but they don't give a rat's about the fact that it's organic, whatever, or they like your price point, but they don't understand that you are an eco-friendly, green, vegan brand. it's those things that you will discover as you go along the journey, and you make a decision as to what needs to happen in order to make sure that there's an alignment there. The strategy and goals is clear. I mean, that based on what I've said, annual objectives will be important as the team grows and the organization grows. But with Agile, it's very much more, as you can imagine, a monthly and weekly conversation about how well the team is doing in terms of objectives. The key results is fundamental, and I don't know whether you've heard of the objective key results, which is OKR, and a lot of businesses are now operating to OKR. But with this and Agile, I'm flipping it to outcome, because it's much more about what is the end result. With objectives, it's much more tends to be short term and or macro, but it's about really delivering on the objectives of the business, but fundamentally on what are the results. So you choose key metrics, whether it be number of users this week, what's your churn rate, and what that means for the business. So you define what that means to the objective. My churn rate is 5%, so therefore, am I going to be able to keep my customers, all the customers I have at the end of the year? Well, as I've explained, no. So therefore, what do you have to do? You either have to increase your loyalty and your retention, or you have to go out and acquire new ones. So by doing that, you end up informing what the business has to do. And then projects is, other things that you can bring in to add. The service augmentation comes from this. So you find, what do I need in order to get to these? Do I need more people? Do I need better people? Do I outsource? Whatever. And then from that you have built a cross-team understanding of what the company is actually trying to achieve. And this is, again, a regular conversation with key result markers showing the success or failure of individual tasks. One thing that I heard a podcast yesterday, which was great, about one project manager who's worked for like 7 or 8 of the big web platforms in the States, and he was talking about how consistent the new methodology of PRFAQ is becoming in a lot of bigger organizations. But I think it's kind of useful when I talk about this kind of stuff to bring it down to how it can benefit smaller businesses and startups. And so PRFAQ is a really great way of, again, challenging what you're planning to do. So if you are wanting to spend the next month doing something, investing in chasing new customers, having a new product launch, imagine writing a press release for that product launch, and then writing FAQs that would then answer all the questions you think a customer would have about, what does this mean? How much does it cost? How do I get it? When's the delivery cycle? Is there a cancellation period? All that kind of thing. So you write your FAQ on that individual project, and then you share it around the team, and you get people to add and take away until you get a refined document. And from that document, you end up really proof testing what you're wanting to achieve from an individual project. And by doing that, Amazon, Microsoft, Airbnb, countless others use this as a way of saying, well, unless you can write a PRFAQ and it's shared and approved by everybody, it's not something we're going to do. And as a lot of the companies I work with grow, particularly product owners and product managers, their job is about saying no to things rather than saying yes to things, because you have to prioritize what's coming next. So I'll just go into the 5 steps. So yeah, love for me is key for loyalty. I mean, it sounds obvious, but it's often forgotten. And again, why a loyalty program doesn't necessarily work for loyalty and truth is that you find when asking loyalty program users, if someone else launched a loyalty program in the same space, would you move? And the answer is, I mean, I saw a stat, 73% of millennials would move from Adidas to Reebok or whatever if they had a loyalty program. There is no loyalty in loyalty programs, so it kind of defeats the object. So with love, you've really got to move rewarding to relating, and you've got to really understand your customer and relate to them on a one-to-one basis. You've got to stop looking at data and engaging. So many clients I've either worked with or been consulted to work for, when you ask them about how well they know their loyal customers, look at you blankly and don't really understand what you mean. And then you ask for the testimonials, you ask for how many sessions they've had with their loyal customers, how many membership events they've had. And all those things are kind of, well, we want to do that eventually type thing. But, you know, the reality is that you can do that at a very early stage. Your early customers, if you are getting it right, will probably be your longest customers and most loyal customers by default. So engaging with your clients from a very early stage is important. Reacting, particularly when it comes to customer service, is, you know, a part of the course. Oh, I didn't get this today, what can I do? But just reacting to it and not learning from it is where things go wrong. So by understanding their concerns, hearing their feedback, and then sharing it with the team, you will find that they get a feeling that, you know, they're being taken seriously, and that they're being heard, and their input's being shared. It's also about not just being interested, that's fine, but that's quite passive. It's about inspiring, and that will be from you, your vision as an owner, as a founder, your passion for what you do. But it will also be about sharing the fun, the enjoyment that other customers are having with your service product. It really helps any business to grow by sharing how great other people feel about your product. It's so dynamic in terms of power. And then it's not just about purchasing, it's about investing. A customer that's coming along and buying something and they're not really invested in it, they're much more difficult to turn into a loyal customer. You've really got to feel as if what they've given you is something that's going to benefit them for a long time, and that they're going to feel that their investment pays off. So it's that feeling of investment that you can do and put in your marketing, whether it's a service, whether it's, for example, fitness is a perfect example of that. You know, you're investing in yourself, and you as a service provider are helping people invest in themselves. So that really creates a bond of love between the two. And this is such a hot topic at the moment, I can't tell you. I mean, across the board, when I look at trade mags across the board, I mean, Currys in the UK, which is a struggling retailer that became a digital retailer, but, you know, transacts serious amounts of white goods, is basically getting rid of customer acquisition and really digging down into loyalty and investing in their team. Acquisition scores are kind of like they're really they're being challenged all the time because of the competitive marketplace. And I think as margins continue to be squeezed in other areas of businesses, if you can keep your customers longer, it's going to help your bottom line at the end of the day. And this kind of goes to the next stage, which is the O, organic. Organic growth is clearly the smartest way to grow a business, and it tends to come from an authentic place. It tends to come from people being connected to you as a service or a product. But it's not structured. It's much more random, and as organic food, organic growth, it won't necessarily come from where you expect. But working in an agile way, that enables an organization to feel that they can trial and test random things and feel that, oh, I wonder if this is going to work, let's try this. And you will find organic growth comes from these tests. It's scary, but it's exciting at the same time. And it also stops the short-termism of, oh, well, I'm going to spend all this money on this campaign, and I'm going to get an ad agency in, and we're going to launch, and we're going to spend a lot of money, and it's going to be a look, and these are my colors, and this is my logo. Stop that and stop thinking short term and thinking about sustainable growth, and also thinking about, it doesn't matter if we fail on this, or it doesn't matter if the logo doesn't resonate. We'll launch with something and we'll improve and grow, and as long as people come with us on the journey, all these things become irrelevant. And the number of campaigns I have out in the market can be 30, 40, 50, all targeting totally different audiences with totally different products. But from that, I will understand what works and what doesn't. Organic growth also tends to come from a community, particularly now. If you've got a digital business, community is absolutely vital to feel that your customers are equally connected and sharing in your journey. So rather than thinking about an individual customer, you need to start thinking about them as a community of fans, which is why, the Ticketmaster model, if you keep on thinking about that, the most powerful audience growth tends to come from fans and their passion and their excitement for an individual artist, for example. That becomes, and when you think that happened before digital, that was something that was kind of organic and grew based on fan excitement. If you start thinking about your individual customers as fans of your product, then you can really start to change your behavior and think of them as your team, your community, because they're the most powerful brand ambassadors you've got. If they like it, then they are going to tell other people about it, and that will grow your business organically. And from that, it becomes the difference between very shallow, very shallow growth to much more deep rooted, which might not necessarily mean they come back every week, but their roots are there, and when they need you, they will come back to you. Membership is a pivot, really, and it's membership is something much more deep and represents a shift. The consumers become the fans, they become the influencers, and they really then almost become your growth strategy, because membership, whether it's closed off, and I'll show a couple of those in a second, or whether it's open, it's really about what happens within that membership that makes your audience grow. And there are 4 M's of membership in my opinion. I'll try and remember them. But the first one is mystical. So American Express, for example, before 1999, they were a client of mine for many years. There was a rumor that there was a secret card, which was unlimited, but it didn't exist. But the rumor got so big that it became something that the business looked at seriously, and then did an invite-only card for people with a certain net wealth, and that still is a closed-off group, and it's a thing to have as a status symbol, but essentially it's a form of membership to a club. Creators Club is another example of membership, and that is much more about mentoring and being a brand that helps bring people in. And what Adidas have done is create a separate club with a separate website, and that's all about bringing influencers, bringing people that will be the future growth of their business into a club, so they can help influence the design and the growth of Adidas moving forward. It's again very it's got kudos, and so really helps bring other people in, but it has a halo effect on the whole Adidas brand. So it's a really important and interesting tool to use. Net-a-Porter have really acted on another of the M's, which is maintenance. When you have a membership scheme, it's all about making sure that the thing is maintained, that the team is your customer base is part of the membership community is looked after and is getting exactly the best for their investment. So in Net-a-Porter, they've again decided to really downscale on their acquisition costs and really hone in on retention. And so they've tripled their customer service team to make sure that they get what they want, they get exclusives, they get limited editions. And so they have that much more regular conversation with their customer base. And the final one, which kind of wasn't relevant until recently, is meetups. Meetups, whether they be digital or physical, are vital to a feeling of community. And for example, this is from Second Home, one of the remote working spaces that I believe has now got a space in Lisbon. But they are very good at adding to the feeling, not only from taking money every month from people to share an office space, but this feeling of community, and adding to it by having regular meetups really helps strengthen the feeling of being a member. So those are 4 pillars really of what makes a membership scheme work in 2022. There's another aspect which I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about, because it is very in vogue at the moment, but it can be challenged based on lack of success so far. But Web3 is potentially a fantastic opportunity for loyalty. And in 20 years' time, we might remember this and think, well, that was the first time we talked about loyalty and Web3. But the reality is that blockchain, as an open, totally transparent way of working, is perfect for A, community, B, sharing, and C, a feeling of togetherness and a common goal, particularly when you get into the sphere of a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. If you set up like these companies have as a DAO, really what you're saying is, if you join us and then you start behaving within our community, using the tokens that we have created to buy services, to share, to reward, really you're part of this program, you're part of this project, and you're a co-owner of this project, which is ultimately, what membership should be. It shouldn't be lots of profit being made and then members. A real true membership, particularly if it's for good, if it's a charitable organization. A DAO is a perfect way to work cross-border, sharing, signing off, all that decentralized decision making that I was talking about with Agile. Web3 and DAO really work for this. So I'll just give you 3 quick examples. So People is a fantastic initiative that is launched in Liverpool. And it's essentially trying to take on the Just Eat, the Uber Eats, the delivery services. They're currently taking about 37% of the margin of any restaurant for delivering and basically promoting their restaurant on their network. That's a huge margin to lose. And what People are doing is they've created a network where people can see the restaurants in their network. They buy tokens on this blockchain, and they then buy their meals through this Fuse network, and they basically transact. But the transaction costs are going to be less than 1%, which means that it makes a huge difference to some of these restaurants that are, as we know, during the energy crisis, are going to suffer hugely. So it's an initiative that's been backed by the Liverpool City Council, and it's also got additional funding from a couple of other organisations. But it's a test, and I think, like a lot of these things, it's about seeing these ideas in real life and see how they work, and see how they evolve, because this could be the future of how people develop organisations and how they reward the people that are part of it. Friends with Benefits is a really interesting one, which is very similar to the Adidas model, which is about people getting together, hiring places to do events, promoting artists, funding artists, both music and art and art, and really supporting that network, both by interaction and meetups and rewards. So that's another kind of like initiative. And this pool suite is essentially a radio network that started in the States, that is now spinning off into other products, that is rewarding people and through their own tokens. But it's an interesting space, and one to watch for sure. This is quite detailed, this why, but it's really vital, and I'll do it really quickly. Yield is vital to loyalty, because you really need to know what's the value of your customer and why you're investing in them. So I've got a couple of analogies. So it's about really how quickly can I recoup the cost of acquiring a new customer, and how much can I afford on average to pay to acquire a customer. So it's two things: how much does it cost, but also how much can I actually spend in order to win one. Now, lifetime value is something that a lot of businesses use, and if you have a one-off business, lifetime value is totally fine. It's a very simple way of looking at things. It's basically saying, okay, how much money will I get from a customer before they leave me, and how much money did it cost me in order to get that client in the first place. And once you do that, you can work out an average and then say, well, if I spend £300, then will I win one customer, or will I win 0.1 of a customer? Therefore, I need to increase my budget. That's a very simple methodology, and it works for most businesses. But once you start getting into subscription, you find things start getting skewed, because subscription models tend to have lots of different price points. And a lot of investors are kind of hoodwinked by averages. And so people will say, well, my churn is 5%, and yeah, we're doing really well. But what they haven't said is that 95% of their 1 years have disappeared, and they're basically being funded by 1 month or 1 week trials, and they won't count that. They do the whole averages game, and so it masks a load of sins. So that can be dangerous. What a lot of businesses are doing now is evolving into what they call a payback period, and that is really, it's quite simple, but it's breaking everything down to the segments I was telling you about earlier. So it's about saying, okay, so in plan A, if that is going to cost me, if that's going to bring in €200, but it cost me 50, or is it the other way around? If it cost me €200 and it only cost me, no, it's the other way around. If it cost me €50, but it brought in €200, then in 4 months, then I'm good. But if you look at plan C, which cost me €200, but it brought in €500 in revenue, then in almost 2 weeks, you've got your money back. So when you start breaking it down into segments, it's really good to see who are the customers that you should be really looking at. And then what I would do with the client is, if they had a subscription model starting, I'd say, okay, well, that's very interesting. Let's have a look at plan C, and let's have a look at the types of customer. Are they geographically skewed? Do they come, or are they gender skewed, or are they age skewed, or a mixture of all three? And that will give you much more reliability in saying, we should be spending more money on these people, because at the end of the day, our payback is going to be way much less.
Yeah, Anthony, we're coming close to an hour.
Okay.
Let's try to take some questions as well.
Okay.
So, but yeah. If you want to, you have a few more slides?
Yeah. I'll just to finish it off then. So with audience, I've kind of talked about that, but it is about segmenting and making sure that people feel involved. But audience is clearly an important part of knowing your audience. And as the statement stands up, that the future of businesses in the future will be about audiences, not necessarily about products. And this is how you'd finish up. And then learning is the end goal, and why it's really important to have in those 5. because you need to learn from every stage. You need to storytell, you need to test, you need to action from the learnings. You need to ensure that cross-functional teams will understand that, and you basically get everything cleared. And then what I would do is then work with a client and build this customer journey with them, and do a what would be called a traffic light system of where you're doing well, where you're not. And yeah, so that's it.
Okay. Yeah, no, excellent. Yeah, sorry to interrupt because I know
I didn't have a clock on me. Sorry.
No. It's a great subject, and you have given us a lot of advice and everything. So you know, I will of course, if it's okay with you, Anthony, I will share your presentation.
Sure, I'll send you a PDF.
Yeah, excellent. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or any comments. I mean, personally, it's, you know, I can relate to everything you said. You know, I worked for 20 years for media and newspaper. I worked for The Economist and then DFT, and it's only really when the paper went into the paywall, you know, the buyer to read online, that they really started to get into the retention. I mean, it was already a little bit, but not much, and the emphasis was always on new business. And what I found the challenging in all this, well, first of all, you mentioned the culture. You know, even if the people on the top are completely with that shift into the retention, how do you make it going down to the team, like you explained? And then the other challenge, which I found, was the data, because you can go completely lost in so many data that are not relevant. So how do you do to make sure that you capture the right data? And certainly at the beginning, you know, at the end, when you have already quite a lot of a big pool of customer, you can analyze who are the ones who are most likely to stay for a long term, and then you try to acquire the same kind of profile of people. But it's all about data, and also, you know, some people will engage differently than others, you know. So it's really a science, and it's
a science.
Big challenge.
It is.
I don't. Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know if you have anything, you know, regarding the data. What would, you know, to capture the right data? Do you have any?
Well, every business is, you know, and what Agile does is break it down. So, like I said, you find a segment to work on, and then you really dig into that, and you get everyone, your representative from each of the teams, to work on a project, and you then test that and see whether it makes any difference. And by doing that, you basically create a Bible, and one that either says, we tried it and it didn't work, we need to do something different, but we don't repeat that again. Because, as you know, and certainly anyone that's worked for a big organization will appreciate, is that the silo organization means that not only with, you know, churn of staff, which means that things get done differently or done again, things aren't shared, things aren't documented, and so you can find 5 different teams doing 5 different things, or worse, 5 different teams doing the same thing but working all separately on the same thing. And then you find in a meeting, well, I was doing that, or I weren't. So and you find this total waste of people's energy and resources. And what Agile does is say, well, it stops that, because people are much more aware of what everyone's doing. But then it says, this team is just going to focus on this. You get on with what you're doing, but we're going to test this. But it doesn't mean everyone has to stop what they're doing in terms of the direction of the business. And then they'll come back to us and show us what they've done. And this tends to, you know, work really well on big organizations. But it's what can't be discounted is that it's really, really vital in early stage as well, because it creates a new way of working. Because remember, a lot of startups are from people that are bringing people from organizations that inherit those old behaviors. And if they're not, if it doesn't change immediately, then they go back to their old behaviors and they become a siloed marketing person that doesn't want to share anything until things ready. Or, right, and you have to stop that and say this is a totally different way of working, and it's transformational when it works, because people feel a weight is lifted from them, because it's okay to fail, because any failure is only small, and any failure is also really important for understanding why it failed, rather than press the button and it didn't happen, right? And it's a disaster, but that stops the disaster from being anything more than a couple of weeks of wasted work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Anybody want to say anything? Joe, you work with a lot of small and medium-sized companies in sales. I mean, do you see a shift? I mean, are people in your case still very, into new business, acquiring new business, and not so much the retention, or do you?
Well, I mean, I loved it. Thanks, Anthony, because it was really relevant as well, because I love focusing on like the customer journey.
Yeah.
It does sound like though I do it like at a different scale, to be honest, though. It's like more with solopreneurs and small business owners.
Yeah.
It does remind me of a company that I worked with in London. And I did sales training there for like 5 years with them. And that was all about getting the different departments to really see how it all joins up together, and how the customer, from the receptions to the accounts, to the sales, to the after sales, to the lettings, and how it all joins in and makes such a difference. I mean, I had to sort of like try and, I was coaching them to see the overall new company goals. And I was dealing with like 50 managers, training 50 managers.
Yeah.
So, but this like takes it to a whole another level, doesn't it? Really, I think
it does, but the principles remain the same. I think the principles remain the same, and I think it's all a bit like anti-agile. If agile people just kept it to themselves, and like this is what we do in our small little groups, then it's a shame, because the principles are for everybody, and you can use agile as a solo entrepreneur in terms of questioning yourself and saying today or this week, what do I want my business to look like in a year? But what do I want it to look like in a fortnight? Because just by doing that, then you can start breaking things down, because the task is, can sometimes feel enormous, particularly when you're launching something. But if you break it down into small bits, and more importantly, just do these daily behaviors, like anything, like exercise, whatever, it then becomes a lot easier. And really, that's all Agile's doing, is saying, break it down so it's much more manageable, and then test yourself against what happened. And if you find that you're not, running up the stairs every day and you're walking, maybe try running every day, and then you find, oh, well, I've done that, and and it's things like that. You find that change of behavior, but you break it down into individual pieces. So
it's good. The Web.3 though looks quite scary.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think it's a lot. When you think how many people are in it and busying themselves with it, but they're not really showing results yet. And what I think is great, I mean, you could look at that people project as an agile project, because they've broken it down into one city with a smaller group of restaurants with one small token, backed by a city council, and they're going to see how it works. They don't have ambitions to do anything more than that until that's proven to work or fail. And that, to me, is a great example of how projects will launch in the future.
Okay, no, that's great. The Web3 we'll talk about it at our event on Thursday. Around tech. We have a panel talking about Web3.
Oh, it'll be interesting to see what they say.
Are you coming down, Anthony?
Can't this week, no.
Right.
You're going, aren't you?
Yeah.
I'll come to the next one.
Okay, no, I mean, thank you so much, Anthony, for really great presentation and all your time. And
sorry, it ran over.
Yeah. Let me stop the recording.